All right, get ready to dive deep today because we're going to be talking all about SBLC leasing and escrow services. I know it sounds a little bit like alphabet soup, maybe even a little bit intimidating, but trust me, this stuff is interesting.
Especially if you are a small business owner or maybe an entrepreneur who's looking for funding.
Right.
Something beyond just your typical bank loan.
It is definitely an area that's been getting more and more attention, especially for startups.
Yeah.
Startups that maybe don't meet every single requirement that traditional lenders are looking for.
Right.
So we're really talking about financial instruments here. Bank guarantees, we call them BGs for short.
Okay.
And standby letters of credit. So SBLCs, and these act as kind of a safety net, I guess you could say, for different financial transactions.
Okay. So instead of like going directly to a bank and asking for a loan, you would lease a BG SBLC. Mm-hmm. And use that as leverage. Is that what you're saying? So like it shows the lender, the potential lender, that you're good for it.
You got it. It's like you're leasing the credibility of whoever's providing the BG SBLC.
Okay.
And that can really open doors that might have stayed closed otherwise.
Interesting.
And the fact that this whole BG SBLC market is expected to grow a lot, in the next few years.
Yeah.
Just tells you it's becoming more and more common, more and more popular.
Makes sense. But isn't this kind of a risky thing to do? How do you, how can you really be sure that the person providing this BG SBLC is legitimate?
Right.
Not just trying to, sell you a fake instrument.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's a huge question. That's why doing your homework is so important, really digging into their background.
Okay.
The source that we're looking at today for this deep dive is a guy named Michael Choi.
Oh.
He's a solicitor in Hong Kong. And he really specializes in these services. So he actually connects businesses with providers and helps them through the whole process.
All right. So we've got an insider here. We've got some insider knowledge today.
Yeah. I like it. Okay. So let's break down this BGS BLC leasing thing a little bit more. What's the basic idea behind it?
I think a good way to think about it is like renting a car, right?
Yeah.
You don't own the car, but you pay to use it for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same with the BGS BLC.
Okay.
You're leasing it from a provider for a fee, but you don't actually own the instrument itself.
Okay. And then you can use that leased instrument to go get a loan.
Right.
So is the provider basically like vouching for you in a way?
Yeah, in a way they are. Yeah.
Okay.
The provider's own financial standing, their reputation, all that backs up the instrument.
Got it.
So that gives the lender more confidence that you're going to pay back the loan.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this could really change the game for some people.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the practical stuff for a minute.
Okay.
How much does it actually cost to lease one of these things?
Well, typically you're looking at a leasing fee somewhere between 5 and 15% of the instrument's face value.
Yeah.
Plus, there could be some extra charges depending on who you're working with.
Yeah.
For example, Michael Choi's provider.
Yeah.
They charge a 7% annual leasing fee.
Okay.
And then there's a little extra fee for issuing and transmitting the instrument.
Okay.
Which is actually pretty competitive when you compare it to others.
That's good to know. So, are there any limits on how big these instruments can be? Could I go and lease one for $1 billion?
Not quite, no.
Okay.
Michael Choi says that his provider has limits between 20 million and 500 million USD euro.
Okay.
And anything above that, well, it starts to raise some red flags.
Yeah.
Because realistically, if you've got a project that needs that kind of financing,
right,
you're probably going to need a different approach.
Okay, so it's really geared toward more realistic projects, I guess.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. So let's say I'm thinking about exploring this option.
Okay.
What would be my first steps? What do I do first?
Well, first thing you do is you put together an executive summary.
Okay.
Or a detailed business plan.
Got it.
This is for their due diligence process. The provider wants to see what your vision is.
Okay.
How you're going to use the funds, all that.
So they're not just giving these things out to anybody who asks. They really want to see if the project makes sense.
Exactly.
Okay, so what happens after the provider looks over the business plan?
If they give you the green light, they approve it.
Yeah.
Then they'll issue the BGS BLC through a system called Swift MT760.
Okay.
Which is basically the standard way for banks to communicate this kind of financial stuff.
All right. So speaking of banks.
Yeah.
Which banks are we talking about here? Mm-hmm. Are these, reputable, well-known names?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Michael Choi's provider works with some of the biggest players in global banking. I mean, you're talking like Societe Generale.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Credit Agricole, Santander. These are all top 100 banks worldwide.
Okay, that's reassuring. But even with these big banks involved and a solid business plan, there's still that risk factor.
Right.
Especially when you're talking about a lot of money.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So what do you do about that?
Well, that's where escrow services come in.
Okay.
It's like having this extra safety net for the whole transaction.
Okay. Escrow services. Tell me more about that.
Okay.
Okay. Escrow services. Tell me more about that.
Sure. It's actually a pretty simple idea.
Okay.
Basically, you have this neutral third party, we call them the escrow agent. And they hold all the money that's involved in the deal.
Okay.
Until all the conditions, all the things that everyone agreed on.
Yeah.
Until all that is done.
So instead of me sending the money straight to the provider, it would go to this escrow account.
Right.
And then the agent would release it once everything is squared away. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it protects both sides, really, from any kind of scams or, if someone breaks the contract.
Right.
It's really all about building trust,
Yeah.
especially when you're talking about these upfront fees.
Right.
Which, can sometimes be a red flag in this business.
For sure. And this is where Michael Choi's legal background comes in, right?
Uh-huh.
He knows how to set up these escrow agreements the right way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, he's got over 25 years of experience as a senior lawyer, dealing with all kinds of international transactions.
Wow.
So he knows how to craft these escrow agreements so that they're really airtight.
Got it.
And his firm, they even set up a dedicated escrow account for each transaction, just to add that extra layer of security and, make sure everything is transparent.
It really sounds like having someone like Michael Choi in your corner would make a huge difference.
Oh, for sure.
Navigating all of this.
Definitely.
But these escrow services, I imagine they come with their own fee, right?
Yeah, they do, usually.
Okay.
But it's generally pretty small, considering the peace of mind you get.
Right.
Michael Choi recommends trying to get an escrow agent fee that's about 1% to 2%.
Okay.
Of the total amount that's being held in escrow.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Especially with all the risks involved.
Right.
Okay, so let's say I've gone ahead and leased a BGS BLC. Everything went smoothly and it's, metaphorically in my pocket.
Okay.
What's next? Can I actually use this thing to get money? Or is it just a fancy piece of paper? That's
where we get to monetization.
Okay.
Basically, it's the process of taking that BGS BLC and turning it into actual money that you can spend. So you can access the funds before the instrument matures, before it's due.
Okay, so it's like unlocking the value that's kind of tied up in that promise.
Exactly.
I bet that's not an easy process though, right?
It's not quite as simple as cashing a check. No. It usually involves working with these specialized financial institutions.
Okay.
Often private lenders or investment groups.
Right.
Who really know how to handle this kind of stuff.
So I would need to find a monetizer who's willing to work with me and my leased BGS BLC.
Right.
I guess they would take a pretty big cut though, wouldn't they?
Well, the amount you can borrow against the instrument.
Yeah.
It's called the loan to value or LTV.
Okay.
And that can really vary depending on a few things.
Like what?
Well, the rating of the bank that issued the BGS BLC.
Okay.
The specifics of the instrument itself,
Right.
Even just like what's happening in the market at the time, it all plays a role.
So it's not like a set percentage?
No, yeah.
The monetizer has to kind of assess the risk too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's why it's super important to find a monetizer that you can trust.
Right.
Someone who's going to be transparent with you.
Absolutely.
Michael Choi actually mentions that the monetizer he works with doesn't charge upfront fees.
Oh, okay.
Which is a good sign,
Yeah, definitely takes some of the pressure off right away.
Right.
What kind of documents would I need to give them for the monetization process?
Usually they'll need your CIS, Certificate of Incorporation, a copy of the BGS BLC itself.
Okay.
And then a confirmation from the bank that issued it.
Okay.
Just to prove that it's authentic, So
basically proof that I am who I say I am. And that the instrument is the real deal.
Exactly.
It all comes back to trust and transparency.
It really does.
We've been focusing a lot on small businesses.
Right.
But I imagine these BGS, BLCs, and escrow services could be used for other things too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, think about like a big international trade deal.
Mm-hmm.
These instruments can be really important for reducing risk.
Okay.
Make sure everyone does what they're supposed to do.
So like the BG could be a guarantee of performance,
right,
showing that you're serious about the deal.
Exactly.
And then the escrow service would protect everyone's money until the goods or services are delivered.
Yep. It's like having a neutral referee watching over the whole thing.
I like that.
Yeah.
Make sure everything is fair and everyone is protected.
Right.
So these financial instruments, they're powerful tools.
Yeah.
You can use them for small business loans. Or even these really complex international deals.
That's pretty amazing.
It is, but we've talked a lot about the potential benefits.
Yeah.
Are there any downsides or risks that people should be aware of?
Of course.
Yeah.
You know, like with any financial tool,
Yeah.
there are always risks to consider.
Okay.
It's super important to find providers that you can rely on.
Right.
And you have to do your research, really dig deep.
Absolutely.
To avoid those scams or those deals that sound way too good to be true.
So it's not just about understanding how these instruments work.
Right.
It's also about choosing your partners carefully.
Absolutely. It's like setting off on a voyage.
Correct.
You need to know how to navigate the waters.
Yeah.
But you also need a solid ship.
Right.
And a crew that you can trust.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most important step for someone who's thinking about using these services?
I think the key is to make sure your financial goals are aligned with the right tools. BGSBLC leasing and escrow services can be really powerful, but they're not a magic solution for everything.
Right.
They have to fit your specific needs and your risk tolerance.
So it's not just about finding the cheapest provider.
Right.
Or the biggest instrument. It's
Right.
about finding what works for your situation.
Yeah. And that's where getting advice from an expert can be really helpful.
Okay.
Someone like Michael Choi, with his experience and his ethical approach, he can really help you figure out your options.
Got it.
And navigate all the complexities.
Beyond the mechanics of all of this, it seems like there are some bigger principles at play here.
Yeah.
Transparency, trust, responsible financial management.
Absolutely.
Those are important for anything.
They are the foundation of any successful financial endeavor, really. Whether you're a small business looking for funding or a big multinational corporation doing these huge complex transactions.
It sounds like we're talking about a whole different way of thinking about finance. Not just a one-time transaction, but approaching it with responsibility.
Yeah.
Being aware of what you're doing.
Exactly. Being proactive.
Okay.
Doing your research, understanding the tools that you're using.
And that actually reminds me of another service that Michael Choi started offering recently, which might be relevant for our listeners.
Oh, yeah.
It's debt financing.
Okay.
Debt financing. Okay. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's basically a one-stop shop for businesses that are trying to get loans. Using a BG as collateral.
Okay.
So it makes the whole process a lot smoother. And what's really important is he only works with BGs from his network of providers that he trusts.
Okay.
So you've already got that layer of due diligence built in.
So it's like he's put together this group of reliable partners to make it easier for businesses to navigate all of this.
Yeah, exactly. And he's really big on transparency and honesty, in all these financial dealings.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting the money. It's about building a sustainable business and creating relationships that you can trust.
I like that perspective a lot.
Yeah.
Seems like he's really focused on helping businesses succeed in the long run.
Yeah.
Not just, making a quick profit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all about responsible growth, for individual businesses and for the economy as a whole.
Speaking of the economy, I'm curious about the bigger picture here. Do you think these BGSBLC leasing and escrow services could actually change the future of finance?
It's definitely a trend to keep an eye on, as more people understand these instruments and start accepting them.
Yeah.
I think they could provide some new ways to get funding, especially in places where traditional banking is harder to access.
So maybe they could even be a catalyst for growth and innovation.
Exactly.
Particularly in emerging markets.
Imagine, an entrepreneur in a developing country.
Yeah.
With a brilliant idea.
Right.
They could use a BG to get funding, even if they don't have a traditional credit history.
That's a pretty powerful thought.
Yeah. You could really level the playing field. And unleash a wave of creativity and economic development.
Wow. And as technology keeps advancing, I bet we'll see even more innovation in this area.
Oh, for sure.
Blockchain, smart contracts, all those digital verification tools, they could all make these transactions safer, more transparent, and more efficient.
It's like we're building a whole new financial infrastructure.
Yeah.
One that's more inclusive and accessible to everyone.
It's amazing to think about.
It is.
These complex financial instruments could have such a huge impact.
It's pretty exciting.
So to wrap things up here,
Okay.
what's the one key takeaway you would want our listeners to remember from this deep dive?
I would say the world of finance is constantly changing. And there are new opportunities popping up all the time. Don't be afraid to explore those options.
Wow. Okay.
But always be cautious, do your homework,
Right.
and stay committed to managing your finances responsibly.
That's great advice. Be proactive, be informed, be smart.
Exactly.
And remember, everyone, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
The more you know about these tools, the better you'll be able to navigate this whole world of finance and make decisions that really help you reach your goals.
And don't forget to reach out to experts who can give you personalized advice and support.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us and happy exploring, everyone.
Yeah.
May your financial journeys be both successful and secure.